I feel like it's pretty safe to say that Hollywood movies are faster paced these days than they used to be because they used to be able to trust the audience to stick with it. These days, you kind of have to get to the point quickly.
Yeah.
Um,
For instance, if I showed somebody now, I showed them Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark today,
Yeah.
like how would they perceive it? Like would they say is it actually better than the ones we're showing today?
I agree with Miguel that that is kind of hard without being attacked. It's kind of hard to say which one. If it was personally my choice, and this is just my opinion, it has nothing to do with like facts or anything. But for me, it's Harry Potter series. It's not that old, but I'm not a big fan of the
That's
Harry
us
Potter
too.
series. Exactly.
I always want to be part of something bigger.
Yes.
Let's go!
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the CC podcast. I am your host, Malika, and today I have here with one of the most prestigious critics on RecoBee who love movies more than themselves. And we are so happy about that. And today we'll be speaking about the golden age of cinema, if it's a myth or it's not, and we'll get everybody's opinion on the same. Let's get started. Let's start with a question I have for you. Many so-called golden ages, for example, like Hollywood's studio era, and then goes the 1970s New Hollywood, and then came French New Wave, are later constructs, right? Do they hold up under scrutiny or are they just critical and academic myth making? What do you guys think?
It's still sort of all based on opinion, right? Because
Yeah,
anyone who
definitely.
was growing up in that age, they'll definitely think that, oh, this is the golden era for sure.
Mhm.
But if you were to ask, maybe, and this could be just me, like some random person that didn't grow up or didn't relate to that age, they might not feel like that. They might feel like right now is a golden era for Hollywood for like or films in general for like the multiple different magnitudes of genres we have today.
Right.
I think Unkid is definitely right. Uh, Although I would say I do think a lot of films from those eras do definitely hold up. Um, I feel like a lot of them have a sort of timeless quality that I feel some films today, some bigger budget films today might be missing.
Yeah.
I'm definitely there with both of them that they still held up until now. There's a reason why most of them in that golden age, old years, which I haven't been there yet, but have been regarded special until now, even to some normies that just want to have fun watching movies, let's say at home or at cinema. And what James had said that some big budget movies have nowadays have kind of lacked in comparison to the old ones. Yeah, that kind of depends on the opinion of what the person thinks overall. So,
Nice. That's nice to know, like what we are starting off with. And I'm seeing what everyone almost thinks. Let's go on to another question. Conversely, today's cinema has more diversity, definitely, and more creative freedom, but also it has franchisee dominance and algorithmic filmmaking. So what do you guys think which system like produces a more long-lasting art as a cinema?
Yep, I definitely feel like you put a good point there. Franchise
Yeah,
domination, that's definitely been a thing. I mean, this month itself, we have a bunch of sequels coming out, like
yeah.
um
Final
Final
destination.
Destination, Mission Impossible. There was one earlier this May. In Hindi it was Raid 2, but there was another one for English as well, but it's not ringing up. There's just too many that's hard to count sometimes. So the franchise domination is it just keeps growing. Like as time
Yeah,
progresses, we see more and more sequels, reboots, resurrections, and all that.
right. Okay. So what do you like guys think? Which era? is producing like more long-lasting art, in your opinion?
I feel like the older eras are. I got to agree with well, you and Ankit were both mentioning kind of franchise domination, and it is important to note that indie filmmaking is bigger than it's ever been. I mean, it's easier than it's ever been for anybody to pick up a camera and
Hmm.
shoot their own movie.
Yeah.
But when it comes to big budget Hollywood filmmaking, I feel like there's definitely a timelessness that's been lost um, due to the reliance on franchises um, and big IPs that already have a fan base that films are being made for, basically.
Yeah.
And I feel like in that sort of ring, we see less creativity, which I think breeds less timelessness. But on the smaller scale, I think definitely there's more today than there's ever been.
Yeah.
I understand why you like the whole, because you mentioned the whole idea of franchise dominance. It makes sense. I mean, for the past, I remember back in 2023, that summer was filled with pretty much almost every single franchise having big blockbusters. And now we're having some again. Just by tomorrow here, Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning should be out now with same with the Final Destination Bloodlines. And I understand what James mentioned that there's well, I understand why that it tends to dominate over, let's say, smaller budget indie films because again, this is an IP that we're all familiar with, and well, obviously, industries love sticking to that. They tend to stick to that because it's an IP we're all familiar with. So everybody's familiar with that. So the industry will be like, okay, I want to stick with that the most because that's what we're familiar with. So yeah, that's the idea of having the franchise dominating mostly indie films as a bunch.
That's great. That's great to know. I guess everyone has like really strong points when it comes to franchisee domination because before it wasn't like this big of a thing where cinema, they did not even think about, having another sequel or anything else because before Hindi films used to be like about 3 hours and everything, and they used to have the entire story come up in that period of time. But yeah, I guess it has changed a lot of patterns since.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to add how um talking about like different eras having different importances, like
Yeah.
James was mentioning about indie films. Before there wasn't much support for that. Now we're seeing with the new generation being more supportive and being able to support such films, better word of mouth, and of course the big boom of social media plays a big play as well too, because back then there was no social media. So how do
Yeah.
people know about a movie? Just simple word of mouth, like physical presence or maybe just a telephone as well, but it's literally just physical word of mouth. But here there's digital word of mouth. There's like digital posters,
Yeah.
social media ads. There's like bunch of different ways to make that appeal. So for a movie to make appeal back then, is definitely, in my opinion, more significant because it didn't have those advantages. Now that a movie has those advantages, it does take more, well, it's easier to make more of an impact. But at the same time, because there's more advantages, there's more competition now. So now there's just more competition compared to before.
Mm.
I
What do
think
you?
nice example of what Unbiased mentioned. Um, and joining what James mentioned with the indie films, a nice example, one of the best movies so far, which was by Ryan Coogler, that one being Sinners. That one's definitely not a franchise movie overall, but considering the high praises the film has been getting, that one already had a massive advantage because of the social media, the word of mouth. It all relies on those two mostly, and the fact that audiences are willing to, because some people tend to we're going to the franchise dominance. Some people are like, oh, we're helping franchises, but we're not helping the indie films on the other hand. But then we look at a movie like Sinners, and that's kind of the exact opposite because that film is pretty much still dominating the cinemas until now. Like for instance, here in the Philippines, I checked the schedules of where the malls are, and when Thunderbolts came out, that was just
Yeah.
like I believe 1 or 2 weeks after Sinners. Surprisingly, Sinners is still filled with so many seats, whereas Thunderbolts was still dwindling with the seats on its opening weekend, which definitely proves that that word of mouth and the advantage that social media is giving us, it's definitely showing that because before again, as you mentioned, as mostly unbiased mentioned, it was really tricky for them. But now we're having a big advantage with the generation nowadays helping us out much more and more.
I feel it has like Sinners has outdone because there is like a lot of fan following as well, even from here, like even from Bollywood, even from Indian audiences. They know Michael B. Jordan, they know Haley Steinfeld, and there's like a lot of impact that they made here. So it has given them a really good plus on, being so big. So I'm moving on to the next question. If you showed a modern blockbuster to audiences, in 1940s or let's take 1980s, let's not go that back, let's go 1980s or 1990s, or a 1990s melodrama to today's audiences, would they agree it's superior or like is greatness always contextual on other people's perspective? What do you guys think?
That's an interesting one. Like, what you mean? Like, if I showed them, for instance, you said 1980s. For instance, if I showed somebody now, I showed them Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark today.
Yeah.
Like, how would they perceive it? Like, would they say, is it actually better than the ones we're showing today? Well, honestly, I'd say yes, because I showed Indiana Jones to my friends, and they were pretty much astonished by it being like an old film. Like that's 1981. Of course, you could connect Temple of Doom, Last Crusade, all those 80s films. But there's something special about those films that were made back in the days. There's a reason why those old films have been regarded by so many as the definitive template of what movies have been trying to copy nowadays,
Yeah.
and yet they don't have the exact impact of what they had back then. So
Yeah, I will say, and part of the question, if we go in the reverse order, like if we were to show a modern movie back to someone from the 80s or something, like if we were to travel back in time, one great example is Tron Legacy. Like if
Yeah.
we were to show that movie back then, not many people would have liked it, but like then later on they would have said, "Oh, this is ahead of its time." So that's why we hear the term this movie was ahead of its time because at that time no one was quite appreciating it. But then when
Yeah.
they realized that, oh, nowadays, and this could go on for debate, that story is not like the number one factor that producers are looking for anymore. And Tron Legacy, as an example, didn't have like the best story, but like it's known for its visuals and music, right? Which was what made it ahead of its time. So if you were to show that to someone in the 80s, they're like, wow, this looks great, but where's like the compelling story? Or, and there's
Yeah.
other examples like that too. Movies that just are termed or deemed ahead of its time. Like for Hindi, it's Ravan. Ravan was also deemed as ahead of its time too.
Right.
So that's what I feel would happen if you were to show a modern movie to someone back in the past.
Like there's something to be said about the difference in audiences too. Um, I feel like it's not too controversial to say that audiences these days have shorter attention spans.
Yeah.
Um, so and we're kind of seeing movies like be catered towards that now. Like I feel like it's pretty safe to say that Hollywood movies are faster paced these days than they used to be because they used to be able to trust the audience to stick with it. These days, you kind of have to get to the point quickly
Yeah.
um, to kind of I guess accommodate for the shorter attention spans of most audiences. Um, But at the same time, I mean, Sinners kind of took its time with what it was doing, and it's still a success. So, maybe it's not there's not as big of an impact as it might seem. Um, so I there's definitely a difference in the audiences that I think maybe we need to consider.
But again, I feel with the Tron, if we showed Tron Legacy to even today's kids, I feel they would be very happy to see that. They won't, I don't think they would say it's outdated. I feel
Hmm.
they would never say it like that because all of the, how to say that, all the niche and everything, even the smallest bits, given the set, given the costumes, given the
Hmm.
language they spoke, but everything, it was so, I don't know, it was very techy, it was very 2020s already back then. So yeah, that is actually true.
Yeah, it was
It
ahead of its
did
time
give
for
like a
sure.
good dad-son relationship for the story, for the sake of the story, right? As you were saying, as Ankit was saying, he like if it had a story element, is what I'm trying to say, just for the sake of for the script to have a story. So yeah. So name one beloved classic that's actually overrated, okay? And one modern film that you think will be remembered in next 20, 30 years.
Off the top of my head, um, I honestly think Close Encounters of the Third Kind is pretty overrated. I know I just talked about attention spans and everything, but
Yeah,
I find that movie abysmally slow. Um, and I feel like a lot of people would say I'm not a person that has a short attention span. Um, but I don't. Maybe I need to give it another watch. But I feel like that movie would not hold up to today's scrutiny.
yeah.
Um, but for movies that will be considered classics, a lot of people say Babylon, um, which I'm kind of inclined to agree with. I feel like that was not a movie that I loved, but I feel like in 10 years time people will look back and maybe say like Anku was saying it was ahead of its time or um people just didn't understand it at the time. But I that is one that I think will develop definitely a cult following. And my easy answer is the Batman from 2022 with Robert Pattinson. I seriously think that in 10, 20 years time that will still be considered a great superhero movie. Um, Especially because it kind of like broke the mold of what superhero movies are right now and were in like the 2022. Um, went for a more detective direction. So I do think that one will be considered a classic in the coming years.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
I
Um, as for overrated, that's kind of a tricky one because almost all of the old films I never saw before. That one's a tricky one for me. But for one that I think will be a beloved classic soon, I'm exactly with James right there. One of them would have to be Babylon. I mean, I watched that thing, that being the 3 hour long movie, and I absolutely loved it as it's Damien Chazelle's version of what Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was basically. And I love that movie, and I absolutely love Babylon. Aside from some of the things that it did, a little bit iffy to me. And one that I can definitely say would be a classic 10 years later is the Japanese movie Godzilla Minus One. That film absolutely winning everybody over at the time because before that, to be honest, because I am a big Godzilla fan, I can agree that almost everybody was at the time just saying that, oh, I just go to the Godzilla movies just for monsters just going smack smack on everybody. Because I still remember James and we talked about last year's New Empire, which is exactly that point of it, this one being a nonsensical, extravagant movie, sci-fi, whatever. But then you look at Godzilla minus one, I can see it still be a classic because that just proves that you can still have a massive impact when it comes to familiar IPs, and that one definitely proved that. Let me say that even though the franchise has been going for what, 70 years, it can still have an impact. And truly believe that minus one will be an impact to so many audiences within the next decade. So there.
Wow. That's very interesting. I thought you guys say something very, a classic movie that would be like remembered, but yeah, I guess we are turning into fantasy.
Yeah.
Proud.
Yeah, I agree with James with the Batman. Like the Batman is my like probably top 10 favorite Hollywood movies of all time because again, it
Wow.
doesn't follow the traditional superhero trope. It sort of broke the norm and it like at the same time it still felt like a Batman film would
Yeah.
feel like you see Bruce Wayne's character in and out of the suit. So that was nice to see and all um like the little directional hints and like specific details, like him wearing sunglasses inside his house during daytime because he's just that sort of like brightness just shocks him. I don't think they really showed that in the other Batman movies, at least not to that much detail. So that was really cool to see. Or him just like failing, um, just failing to land from his gliders. Like all these little details that maybe to someone when they were watching it was like, oh wow, I was wishing for Batman to be whipping other people's butts, but this Batman is like just failing like miserable. Maybe if they didn't appreciate it then, this could be a movie again ahead of its time that will be appreciated later. But I do think a lot of people did still appreciate the Batman, which is why it did do still significantly well at the box office and the Metacritic score. Um, and so that's a modern movie that I believe that would definitely paint its way as well, as James said. But for a classic movie that's overrated, I agree with Miguel that that is kind of hard without being attacked. It's kind of hard to say which one. If it was personally my choice, and this is just my opinion, it has nothing to do with like facts or anything. But for me, it's Harry Potter series. It's not that old, but I'm not a big fan of the
That's
Harry Potter
possible.
series. Exactly. Um, it just never hooked me. It could be like the vocabulary, or it could be I don't know. It just didn't hook me. I watched the first one, tried watching the second one, but it didn't really hook me. And um then I tried watching one of the newer ones and the Fantastic Beasts or something like that.
Yeah.
That one like really killed it. I was like, okay, I can't stand this series. But also, sort of background, I haven't read any of the books, so
Yeah.
maybe reading the books also helps painting the picture there. I'm not sure. So for me, it would be that. It's not a old series. I mean, it started in the
Yeah.
2000s, right? So can't really say it's a classic that's overrated, but for me, it personally is.
Yeah. Wow, that's very interesting. Nice save with the books line there, by the way.
I'd like to say
Oh,
too mostly. You mentioned you haven't read the books of Harry Potter. I'll just give you an insight. This is mainly on the sixth book, Half-Blood Prince. I don't think you've watched Half-Blood Prince yet, have you?
No, I
Oh, because if you actually read the book, I don't think you'll really stand that movie at all.
I think you may have inadvertently picked the worst ones to watch.
Yeah.
Um, the
Hmm.
first, the first, the first two Harry Potter movies. I know a lot of people like them, but I would probably call them the worst. Like
Yeah.
the third one is where really like, and I hate to be that guy. Like
Mm.
you gotta wait till the third movie, but like the third one really is good. Like Alfonso Cuarón, the direction is so much better. But and then Fantastic Beasts, most people don't like. But
Yeah.
That's
something I did want to mention is that we are talking about uh, franchise domination.
Yeah.
So it's kind of
Hmm.
funny that we all brought up, Miguel brought up Godzilla minus one, and Ankit and
Yeah.
I both brought up the Batman. But I feel like those two characters are exempt kind of from that sort of franchise domination because they're continuously reinterpreted and by different artists. Like if you look at Godzilla minus one, and compare it to the original Godzilla, they're very different movies. And
Yeah.
that's the same goes for the Batman and any other prior Batman movie, basically. Um, so I feel like they're evergreen characters. And so every interpretation of them, there's a sufficient amount of time between the each reinterpretation, and each reinterpretation is different enough to where they feel new.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's funny that we've been talking about franchise domination and we brought up those
Yeah.
characters, but I feel like there's an argument to be made that they're kind of exempt from that.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree with that because in the first half, everyone was like, yeah, franchisee has, taken over and everything. And then everyone's favorite classic that would be remembered are also a franchisee. Finally, like Hollywood and Bollywood has done their magic to us and made us love franchisees now.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
probably because you get to see at least one character that you relate with, and if
Yeah.
a series or if a franchise continues to show that character without like doing them dirty, even sometimes if they are done dirty, people still like the franchise. But if you just are able to stick with it, then you just that's the more impacting ones because now you have three or four multiple movies about that single character, whereas a standalone movie, for example, we can just say The Sinners, for example. I mean, uh, now, yeah, if there's going to be sequels for that or whatnot in the same universe later on, but if it were to be a standalone movie or 20 years down the road, you would remember it as a good movie. But if the question would be, would you stick with the character as you would with
Yeah.
the Batman, which has multiple enumerations, or Godzilla, or Spider-Man, or even Indiana Jones, right? Like they
Yeah.
have just multiple enumerations, right? So they're gonna have a longer lasting impact whether you like it or not.
Right. So very important question given that you all, you guys relate to the characters a lot. Do you feel that your perspective of golden age of cinema is heavily impacted by nostalgia? Or because you saw certain movies because at that point of time you were like, since we are, in our childhood, we are too present and we love everything almost. And then we, catch up to certain characters. So how do you like how much of the percentage of golden age is impacted by your nostalgia?
But for me, honestly, that's not exactly based off nostalgia. I mean, don't get me wrong, we have iconic classics. Outside franchises I could think of as nice, amazing solo films, I mean, from stuff like Stanley Kubrick, Alfred Hitchcock. I mean, one of
Yeah,
my favorites was definitely Rear Window, for instance. But most of that was not really because of nostalgia. I kind of they're mostly due to the sense of curiosity from what everybody else has been saying because at the time I've been just watching reviews of those old classics and considering since majority of the reviews have been widely praising them, I've been curious myself to actually watch them and actually believe that they're actually iconic classics. A nice example, two examples are very old movies, black and white. One of them was It's a Wonderful Life by Frank Capra, which soon became my favorite Christmas movie out there just because of I watched this review of the movie, and he mentioned about how beautiful It's a Wonderful Life is. Now it relates to me because like James and also I'm biased right now. We're about our movies. Love movies right now. And the point is that we're happy with what we do, and like that's why I love It's a Wonderful Life. Number one was it was 12 Angry Men. That one also being my favorite court drama out there. So if everybody says that film is an iconic classic, I might as well take a look at it since it actually works because of that. And when it comes to nostalgia, that mostly falls down to that mostly falls down to franchise films overall. Like say Indiana Jones, Star Wars, a majority of what Lucasfilm has been doing. Disney classics, basically the main IPs that worldwide audiences will be familiar with, basically. Those that were easy to connect with, a majority of them. That's the most. So when it comes to nostalgia, that's mostly again with big franchises we grew up with from the old years. But majority of them for me would be out of curiosity instead.
Oh, wow. That's interesting to know.
Yep. For me, for this question, I have like two separate answers. One is like if you're going from a general audience mindset,
Yeah.
nostalgia plays a really big part. Like
Right.
it heavily is like, oh, back in my age or back in my time, only this set of movies are good. Everything else that
Yeah.
comes out now is trash. But then if someone who were to grow up in this age of movies, and again, if they're a general audience, they'll say the same thing 20, 30 years
Yeah.
later. But as a cinephile, or like in also sort of my title, I try to stay mostly unbiased. There's we like to see the good things regardless of uh of the age, as you know, and the same could be for James Miguel and other critics on this platform. No matter what time the movie came out in, modern, late, I feel like it's the quality of the movie that plays more than the content. So that's why those are my two separate answers. Yes, one for cinephiles. Maybe nostalgia does play a little bit, but it's gonna be the content. Like we're here to look for good content, right? We're gonna remember the good ones, regardless of the time. It could be a good movie like Shutter Island. Thunderbolts was pretty good too. All these different modern movies, or the Killers of the Flower Moon, the Leo DiCaprio movie that came out like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And then older films too, like the first Jurassic Park,
Mhm.
um, 12 Angry Men. That's a really good one.
Mhm.
I think they did a color version of it too. Um, but these are all different movies that for us feels great. But if it were general audience, they'll probably be like, they don't make movies like 12 Angry Men anymore, or they'll say they don't make movies like the first Jurassic Park anymore. Now it's all about like aliens and stuff. So it's just general audience versus cinephiles might have different answers for this question.
I think Ankit kind of hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like, personally speaking, if I'm just thinking about like my favorite movies, a lot of them are ones I've seen for the first time in the past 5 years since I started doing reviews. Um, and I had like they're from all different eras. I mean, I love, Unforgiven is one of my favorites. That's from the 90s. Uh, but I also love Casablanca. That's from the 40s.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm kind of open to any era and any genre, but that's easy to say as a person, as for us as people that kind of look at movies in this way.
Yeah.
And I do think that for general audiences, there probably is that nostalgia factor. And I think on the flip side of that, we as people that look at movies like this can go back to movies from our childhood and recognize that they're not good. Um, like I'm sure this has happened to Miguel and Unkit multiple times. I went back to Atlantis: The Lost Empire, the Disney movie, and I was like, this is really not that great.
I agree.
And yeah, but I loved that movie as a kid, so I feel like it's easy for us to kind of sit back and say, kind of remove nostalgia from the equation. Um, And some of the nostalgia is warranted. I mean, like we said, I feel like we kind of all agreed that Hollywood has turned into something that relies way too much on franchises. And maybe there's an argument to be made that quality has overall decreased, but um, there definitely, I mean, I see it with my dad all the time. He's not a fan of new movies, even
Yeah.
ones that I think are great. So I think Ankit kind of hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah. I think that differentiates like from general audience to legit cinephiles, right? That, yeah. they're like you guys are not really impacted by nostalgia. Like it's more on the lines of what you guys like and how curious you are towards a particular genre. So yeah, that's great to know. And now I'm out of questions because that was it. Do you guys have anything? Do you want to speak about anything given the golden age of cinema or anything you guys like to discuss about anything?
Which I do want to talk about because, again, it's kind of funny that we've all been mentioning franchise domination,
Yeah.
but personally, Mission Impossible has been one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I am
Wow.
a huge Mission Impossible fan, but I feel like this is kind of proof that reboots and remakes and sequels aren't always bad.
Right.
Because Mission Impossible is one of those things that Tom Cruise is always trying to push the envelope
Yeah.
of what can be done in terms of stunt work and action, and what can excite an audience. So, using a sequel to push the envelope in that way is not always a bad thing. And I think a lot of people would probably agree that the first Mission Impossible is not the best one. Um, a lot of people do like it. I love it, but the sixth one, Mission Impossible Fallout, is probably my favorite action movie of all time. And I know there are people that would agree with me. So sequels we can't just it's not that black and white. And I hopefully we've made that clear throughout this whole discussion. But yeah, it, sequels, reboots, remakes are not always a bad thing. Reinterpretation can be a good thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, pushing the envelope in terms of like action, for example, like with Mission Impossible, it can always be a good thing. Um, and yeah, aside from that, all I was gonna really say was some new audiences might be surprised with what they go back to. Like for example, a lot of people these days will just brush off like black and white movies. Um, my girlfriend and I, when I wanted to watch Night of the Living Dead for the first time, the George Romero movie, um, she was a little bit averse to it because it was in black and white, but then we watched it and we both loved it. So I think new audiences might be surprised if they go back and find something that they might not think they're going to like, but they might be surprised.
Yeah. Definitely.
On that whole Tom Cruise note as well, I'm more of the person that likes the Top Gun series a bit more. I mean, there's only like two movies, but like I feel like, and that proves James' point that, and you can call it a reboot or a sequel, Maverick, but uh, it was a really good movie. It's like
Yeah.
probably one of my favorite Hollywood movies of recent times because it showed Tom Cruise's acting range.
Yeah.
Usually you see his action range in Mission Impossible and other movies as well, but Top Gun Maverick really showed his acting range so that if anyone ever tells you that, oh, Tom Cruise doesn't know how to act, he can only do stunts, you can tell them that, hey, watch Maverick. Not only
Yeah.
it's a good sequel, but it also shows the acting platform. It has a good, compelling story as well about team building and all. So to answer the question as is it lacking depth? No, because for example, Maverick has more depth than the first film, in my opinion. The first Top Gun film didn't have much depth. It was like pretty straightforward, whereas Maverick was a bit more compelling and it really still appealed to modern audiences and the returning fan base as well. So, yep, there are still, and to Miguel's point, there are still plenty of surprises out there in modern movies today. I'm sure the two main movies that I'm looking forward to like later this year, they're also sequels. So again, back to
Yeah.
the whole franchise domination. One of them is War 2 for Bollywood, and one of them is Tron Ares, just because I'm a big Tron Legacy fanboy.
Yeah.
So
Don't
it's
get right.
yeah, it'll be nice to see. It looks like they're literally picking it up from where they left off from, which is nice because Legacy
Yeah.
did the same thing with the 1983 Tron. Um, so it'll be nice to see how they go forward. And yeah, I'm ready for those surprises, and it can have depth.
Yeah. I think it's not the remakes that's the problem. It's the way they keep using it. And I think many of the films overuse it, even when it's not required, maybe. And that's why the entire perspective of remakes is like a bit Great. So yeah, that's great to know. And yeah, thank you so much for joining this call. Do you mind if I take like one photo of the screen, if you don't mind? Yeah, you can pose if you want, you can do anything. We'll just post it on the story that we had a good chat. That's it. Yeah. So let's go. Oh wow, everyone pulled up with a thumbs up, and that's really nice. Love that. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for joining this. And I hope I'll come up with some more interesting topics that you guys want to speak about, and we'll keep speaking about such topics. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you for whoever is watching this. If you like this, please hit the like and do subscribe, and please keep watching for more interesting topics.